Women of Reddit, we've had a lot of sticking your dick in crazy questions. What happened when crazy stuck their dick in you? He was troubled. Father was an alcoholic who killed himself. A fact he managed to bring up anytime I attempted to end it. He tried to convince me to run away with him. We were 17/18, but I rebuffed him time and again. It didn't help that my mother adored him and we went to different schools. So, I'd come home and he'd already be there waiting for me, every day. After I finally broke it off, he'd drive by my house at all hours and leave gifts on my porch. A few months later, he got a new girl and I began dating a friend of his. They decided we should all hang out. So one evening we rent a movie and grab some booze. My ex and his girl immediately started making out hardcore, which didn't bother me. But when she started moaning, I glanced over and he's eyeballing me, like, tongue down her throat, hand in her pants, all while staring straight at me. So I faked ill and walked home. On my way, he pulled his car up next to me, and offered me a ride. I said, "F off." Then he started screaming at me from his car. "Don't you get it? I'd do anything for you. I love you. I'd die for you." I ran the rest of the way, cutting through yards so he couldn't follow me. When I got home I was nearly crying. I was so frightened. My dad saw me come through the door and started flipping out, assuming my new boyfriend had done something awful. Fearing my boyfriend would catch shit, I finally explained everything about the ex. I felt so dumb and guilty, and cried like an idiot. My dad just listened and tucked me into bed. The next morning, I looked out the window to find the ex's car across the street. By the time I got downstairs, my dad was walking back inside and the car was speeding down the road. Dad evenly said, "I talked to him, and that was that. Never saw ex again." Ya really gotta love a good dad. Tried to force me to choose between him and many activities that I enjoyed. Super controlling behavior. I tried to break up with him like an adult. He reacted by pretending I wasn't breaking up with him, then escalating to telling me that he was going to take the truck we owned together and my dog and leave me in another state. I switched into survival mode, pretended I wasn't serious about breaking up, and started looking for a way out. He escalated again by reading my emails and telling me which friends I could see and when, and what I could use our truck for. Thank goodness for my friends and Google Incognito mode. I left while he was at work and called him from a rest stop 2 hours away to tell him we were done. Man, reading these responses, they are completely different to the stick dick in crazy ones. Saw a meme once that said the reason you never hear about crazy ex-boyfriends is because the partner usually ends up in a body bag. Similar thing happened to a young girl in my town recently. She went to meet her ex one final time and he raped and shot her. Left her naked in her family's van and it was her dad that found her. Just came out that he, the boyfriend, sexually assaulted her as she was dying. He turned into a gaslighting textbook sociopath. He pushed one of those standing rotating fans on me while I was asleep. I woke up and he was just completely pissed off. I had no idea why. He told me he was talking to me while I was sleeping and I rolled over so that I wasn't facing him. Apparently that infuriated him. He was a terrible person. That relationship only lasted about 5 months. It was a nightmare. We got married, had 2 kids. Then he flipped and showed how possessive and controlling and angry he really is. We broke up and then he kicked me out and turned his anger from me to them. Now I have our kids and he has supervised visits. And I have a wonderful boyfriend that the kids adore. I got my confidence and emotional stability back. I tried to break up with my high school boyfriend of 3 years approximately 4 times before it finally stuck. Whenever I tried, he'd hold me against walls and cry, tell me I wasn't allowed to leave him. He once cornered me and played with a knife as he told me how much he loved me. The last time, I broke up with him over text because I feared for my life. I was trying to avoid that and not be shitty, but it had to be done. His mom called me saying he was running around the house threatening to kill himself. I could hear him yelling in the background things to tell me, and that I needed to get over there and say sorry. I hung up on her and never spoke to him again. Oh, did I mention I kept trying to dump him cause he had a whole other girlfriend of like 6 months. He refused to let me break up with him because he wasn't getting a choice in it. then threatened to throw himself in the river. When I got upset at that, he said he wasn't going to, that was just him not giving me a choice. I didn't even sleep with him. I took him home, but he freaked me out, so I asked him to leave. He sent me a barrage of texts and called me constantly for 2 months. He turned up outside my house at 3 a.m. and told me to come out or he'd come in. He alternated between abusive and aggressive, and acting like we were dating, which we had never. He eventually went away, but I learned he'd just moved on to bothering another girl in town. You, Joe. His lies gradually unraveled over time. By the time I got the courage to dump him, it had come out that he had been unemployed for 3 years, was still divorcing his wife, who was also his only relationship ever, who he had been abusive toward, and had restraining orders against him. When I broke up with him, he called me every name in the book, then proposed, then threatened self-harm. He would leave sobbing voicemails from different throwaway numbers, accused me of turning him into an alcoholic, and still occasionally pops up as having viewed any new social media accounts despite our relationship having been just a few months several years ago. His next ex wound up calling me for advice when he gave her the same treatment. He beat me up, raped me, threatened to kill me, threatened to kill our child, threatened to kill himself, threatened to kill my family. If I left, he made it clear someone was going to die, and if he couldn't kill me, he'd kill our child and then himself, and or maybe he'd kill us all anyway. Stalked me after I left, though this was before stalking laws in the early 90s, so it wasn't considered illegal to follow someone around, park outside their house, come to their job, call them repeatedly, etc. None of that was illegal then. I ended up having to leave town, to move away. That saved us, me and my little girl. We both had a hard time at first. For anyone in this situation with a baby or toddlers, small children, please do not think your little one is too small to know what's going on or be affected. They are, and they will have trauma, but after a few years things got better. My crazy man radar was sharply honed, so I never got in this situation again, and eventually dated and married a great man. 25 years known, 23 years together, 20 years married. Perhaps the saddest or strangest, or weirdest, I don't know the right word, but what was utterly bizarre and baffling to me was that he didn't even seem to like me at all, let alone feel the all-consuming love he claimed to feel. From the get-go almost he began to put me down, to list my faults, to make fun of my looks, my hair, my color, my intelligence, or rather, lack thereof, my clothes, etc. Everything about me he disliked, all my friends he disliked. He could not stand my family, etc. I had very low self-esteem at the time, and that was partly why I went along with it, as I had a poor idea of myself as well. But I would ask him with great puzzlement, "Why do you insist upon being with me since you dislike me so much? Since I'm so gross and ugly and stupid," and so on. I never got an answer. He'd usually go off into insane roaring. Anyway, many years later I read the book Controlling People by Patricia Evans, which explained in detail what is going on in the minds of people like this. In short, it's not about you at all, it's the craziness inside them. Fascinating read, which explains why these people react with violent rage and want to beat up or kill the person who leaves. He was always super sweet and casual around friends. Part of my extended friend group in college. Extremely good looking and charming. All the girls wanted him, so I was really flattered when he'd single me out. Ended up back at his place after a party. Figured we might make out, fool around, but I was younger than he was and a virgin. He asked for a blowjob but then held my face and wouldn't let me up for air. Violent as and I vomited. He didn't care at all. Then he took my underwear off, and even though I was screaming no, he me. I had a tampon in because I was on my period, and I don't think he even noticed. Waited till he passed out in the vomit and blood and walked home. You don't really know what anybody is like behind closed doors. Needless to say, I'm rocking some serious trust issues now. I only kissed him and he went all the way off the deep end. He memorized my class schedule and my general walking route so he could catch me in the halls between classes. Then one day I notice he's on the same bus as me. I'd never seen him on the bus before. It was very obvious that he was following me home since I walked through a large empty field to get from my bus to my house. After that day I frequently saw him walking past my house or wandering through the neighborhood. I stopped going on runs or walking by myself. I was only 14 so I couldn't drive. I took the bus everywhere so this guy put me under house arrest. I was afraid to be home alone but I also didn't have the ability to go anywhere without my parents. Eventually I told my dad what was going on and he started standing outside menacingly and stopped the kid stalking me and told him if he ever saw him near our house again he would be calling the police. Despite being the nicest guy in the world, my dad can look really scary. Eventually my stalker switched to another girl in our school. Then another. After sophomore year he had apparently moved because nobody saw Creepy Mike anymore.